Hey everyone, welcome to Past Lives and the Divine. I'm Gina, the host of this podcast, and today I have a little deeper look behind the scenes of a past life regression. So as you've heard me say on this podcast, I don't know, 1,000,000 times, go check out episode 3 for Anatomy of a Past Life Regression. Well, this is like that, but a little bit more from the hypnotist's point of view. So today I'm sharing part of a class that we teach in the hypnotic arts training. What you're going to hear from this little splice of just one class that we teach in the hypnotic arts training, you're going to hear more about kind of like the structure of a past life regression from my point of view, where I'm at now in my business. I believe that when a client signs up for a session, that's actually when the work begins. So they're thinking about their intention, their spirit guides, and my spirit guides, I believe, are working together to create an experience that'll be just right for that client at that moment in time. So today, what you're going to hear is even more behind the scenes of my process for even before a session begins, how I prepare my clients, how I move clients through the sessions, different types of questions that I ask. And then because it's the hypnotic arts training, you're going to hear a little bit from Sarah Leverett too. She has been on the podcast many times. She is my partner in the hypnotic arts training. And so, yeah, you're going to hear a little bit of this class. So just to give you some context before we jump into this recording, in the hypnotic arts training, before the students actually absorb this information that you're going to hear today, we've covered hypnosis and altered states, what that means, brainwave states, what we're actually doing here. We cover the history of hypnosis, and we also talk about the anatomy of just simply a clinical hypnosis session. So that's if you wanted to do something like weight loss, smoking cessation, other habit or behavior cessation, stress relief, all kinds of things. Those are more directive. And we talk about that, directive, non-directive hypnosis, when to use it, how to use it, and high level. What we do in past life regression is definitely non-directive. So we're covering that beforehand. We also cover intuition. I believe, Sarah Leverett believes, one of the core foundation pieces of a training that I wanted to create for hypnosis was the ability for hypnotists to really understand their intuition. When we're working in these realms of non-directive hypnosis, we're contacting, soul memories, other lifetimes, spirit guides, ancestors, other beings on our spirit team. We're moving through different realms, dimensions, lifetimes, the space between lifetimes. It's really, really important that the hypnotist relies on their intuition. And essentially, that's what we're asking our clients to do. So why wouldn't we do that as well? So we really talk about what it is to lean into your intuition, what it is to be an empath, boundaries, rituals around those boundaries. So we definitely go into that. And then we also cover, before what you're going to hear today, we also cover meditation. What's the difference between meditation and hypnosis? And what is a hypnotic script? A hypnotic script is the intentional words that we use to help a client move into that hypnotic trance brainwave state. So we talk about what needs to go into a hypnotic script, give you all kinds of resources, completely done for you hypnotic scripts, and then also let you know actually like the nuts and bolts of it. So eventually, if you're a hypnotist, you're going to want to probably tweak some scripts to make it even more you, to make it even better for your clients. And we give you those foundational tools as well. In the class before what you're going to hear today, we really dive into just what is the hypnotic regression technique. Regression is where we're going back in time using hypnosis, accessing memories that presently are unconscious or very, very blurry, unable to get a lot of details. So we cover regression and what that is. We can do regression to other lifetimes. We can do regression in this lifetime, to childhood, to time in the womb. So we cover those techniques, and then we go into the past life regression. And there's so many tips, tools, skills, scripts, foundations, techniques that we give you to start, totally structured to get you going into a past life regression, facilitating these sessions, and then with your ability to explore hypnosis, explore your intuition, explore your own gifts, you'll begin to kind of mold that into your own art form in the way that you work with your clients. And then, of course, because past life regression is honestly, I think, kind of an outdated term. Who knows when I'll update, but we talk about the theories behind it. Like, what are we actually doing in this? Like, what are we accessing? There's a number of different theories behind what are we actually accessing when we go into a past life, and we cover all of those because the hypnosis that we do and the hypnosis we teach in the hypnotic arts training is client-centered, meaning my beliefs aren't here for the client. As the facilitator, I'm here to understand the client's spiritual beliefs and then craft a session using that language that is specific to the client. So there are all kinds of ways that people can think of these sessions. And as a facilitator coming out of the hypnotic arts training, you're going to have a broad understanding of that and then skills to really drill down and make this session totally custom to this client. And then, of course, we also go into the nuts and bolts of a past life regression, what you're going to hear today, how I prepare my clients, when I think the client session actually starts. We'll talk about the hypnosis, the analytical questions to help the client kind of integrate what they're seeing, how that affects their life today. After what you hear today in the hypnotic arts training, we cover entity removal, shadow work. We go into a little bit of inner child work is removed or is covered in all of that. We also go into a little bit of the business. So if you're brand new to this and you're creating a hypnosis business, you're going to get some ideas, some structure around that. If you're someone who is just simply adding hypnosis to something you're already doing, whether it's a hobby, whether it's yoga, whether it's a coaching practice, whether it's a counseling practice, whether it's, who knows, astrology, we've got so many different hypnosis plus insert topic that alumni have done. And it's really, really fun to watch. So we go through all of that. And if it's something that's interesting to you, if you want to get more information on this training, click the link in the show notes or go to thehypnoticartstraining.com. We are in December of 2023. Registration opens to the public in January if we don't sell out this month. If you want to get the best price and to be able to register before January 1st, go to thehypnoticartstraining.com, get your name on that email list. And if it's not clear to you, just hit reply to that email and let us know what questions you have. All right, everybody. Gather around the fire for this conversation about past life regression and my little peek behind the scenes. Anatomy of a past life regression. The first thing I think a past life regression starts the moment a client signs up for a session. So the moment they put the money down or, reserve the time on your calendar, however that is, I believe that that's when that session is essentially starting. It's like their spirit guides and my spirit guides on some level are working together to craft an experience. And so within that session sign up and getting them prepared for the session, that's really going to look different based on the types of sessions you're doing or even like where or how you're doing the session. So for example, with a past life regression, the way I do it, everything is done online. So when they actually sign up for the session, as many of you know, as many of you have done, you sign up online and then immediately you get an email back that's like, here's the session time and date, and here's some things that you can do to prepare for the session. So we will be going, I'm going to talk about it more now, but I also want you to know we'll be circling back to this bit about like the sign up, like how do people sign up? How do you get people to like get on your calendar, give you money and get on your calendar? Like what are the logistics behind that? We'll be talking about that in a session or in a class sometime in May. So we're not going to get into those necessarily nitty-gritty details. But in the session sign up, it is something that you have to think about, right? It's like where the session begins. So I like to ask them just how did you hear about me? That's how you know what marketing is working. And then I ask a couple other things too, just to try to evoke more information from them. Not necessarily that they have to pick like what their session's going to be about signing up for a past life regression at that moment, but it really encourages them to think about like, what is your intention? And it keeps them thinking about it. So between the time that they sign up and they come to a session with me, they've been thinking about it. And then before the session, I read what they wrote and then just ask them during the intake, like, here's what you wrote. Is this still where you want to go? Do you want to take it in a different direction? But it's a really great place for everybody to start, as to just thinking about that intention. So like I said, after someone signs up on my website, then they get a response email. And so anytime someone signs up, no matter how it goes, in person, over the phone, over the internet, I think it's a good idea as a hypnotist to give them some things to do before you meet. So especially if it's a one-on-one, like first time client, that's more what I'm talking about here. So for me, when someone signs up for a past life regression, they're going to get an email that says like, hey, check out episode 3 of my podcast. It's called Anatomy of a Past Life Regression. And that takes care of so many first timers questions. And even though it's my podcast and most of my clients definitely come from my podcast, I still call that out because people have plenty of questions, even after just listening to that episode one time. So it's a good reminder. And that would be something like if you felt like, oh, I would love to share that with a client, like you could create your own audio file, an anatomy of a session, how you do it, or you could just send them to episode 3 of Past Lives and the Divine, if that's how you do a session. So I think it's a good idea just to like remind them, like, here's what's coming up in the session. And then if there's anything to prepare. So for a hypnosis session that's remote, I tell them how to prepare their space, some things to keep in mind. Again, those are like details that I can share with you in the future and will share with you in the future. But even if you're seeing clients in person or in an office or however you're doing it, you need to obviously let them know, like, where is the session, what they need to know, what they need to bring, maybe not drink 10 cups of coffee beforehand. So there's all kinds of things that we can do to help our clients get ready for that session. And it's really kind of just finessing, like, what kind of session are you offering? How are you offering it? And what do people need to feel ready for that? So it really is going to be kind of dependent on like how your business is set up, or even if you don't think of it as a business, if it's something you're doing for fun on the side, it's still things that we have to keep in mind. The last thing I'll say about the prep is I like to give people what I call a stress relief track. It's just like directive hypnosis, audio track, general stress relief, but it really is like a practice relaxing and getting used to my voice. So the more often we're in that altered state, the farther we can go, the more information we can get, and the more often we the more often we do that, the better we are. And the more often we do that to a particular voice, the farther we can go with that voice in the future. And so that's why I like to give that to people. And it's a really great way. I have never had a client come and not go anywhere. I think that's for a few reasons, but which we'll get into. But I do think one of the reasons is because I give them that audio track and I say, listen to this 2 or 3 times before we meet. And most people do. Then in the intake for a past life regression, it's similar to a regular hypnosis session intake where you want to get their intentions for the session. Why are they here? So for me, my intake in a session is about like maybe 20 minutes. That's a long time actually for an intake for me. But I have the questions that they fill out beforehand. So they've gotten a lot of that information out. It's really just kind of clarifying where are they at today with that information. But the intake is really, I think that we could overthink an intake. And just to remember here that you want to get the information that you need and not spend a lot of time like digging any deeper than you need to. And Sarah, if you feel like you have a different way to explain that, I feel like you might, But I guess the way I'm saying that is, I don't need to know what their relationship is like with their mother, with their father, with this important relationship. I just need to know, what does that client need to know about that relationship? So I don't necessarily have to know the backstory of their childhood. I just have to know like the one thing that they're grappling with that they want to uncover today. So in that intake, we want to get the information, like the intention for the session, where are we going? If they have any fears or apprehensions or any questions, we of course want to address that. But the intake doesn't necessarily have to be super deep and super layered. We are not therapists. We are not psychologists. We are here to come together to work on a specific intention, help them get that information, and then leave. Hopefully we all leave better for it. But that really is what it's about. Sometimes it can feel like we need a lot of time on the intake. And if that's something that works for you and something that makes sense to you, you can definitely do that. But if you're someone like me where I was like, I don't even know where to begin, like if I'm going to dig deep. And to me, it just helps to be like, why are we both here? What do we want to explore? And then go from there.
I agree that I don't necessarily dig into the backstory and much further into the details other than just the intention, the why, and the questions that they have. I would say that the majority of my intake time is really to field questions, build trust, like go ahead and do pre-hypnotic suggestions. Most of the time for me is around like the rapport building and just making sure that everybody's comfortable and confident and has all their questions answered before diving in. But I would say, yeah, mine's probably about 15 minutes or so.
That's part of practicing these sessions, is really part of that intake too, of like figuring out your own flow for that. And you've already practiced it with your hypnosis sessions. We've already talked about intake in the vein of hypnosis sessions. So you can take those same thoughts and apply it here. Okay, so then we move into, once we have the client comfortable, we know where we're going, we've answered the questions of the client, built that rapport, just listening, being trustworthy, that sort of thing. Then we move into the induction. So as we've talked about before, the induction includes that guided imagery, using all 5 senses, progressive relaxation, couple deepeners. And then in the case of past life regression, we're using a regression technique. So whether we're taking, going back in age in this life into a past life, or if we're just going right to a past life, or going to the Akashic records or the Hall of Knowledge and then into a past life, that is how we're doing it. Or through an emotion, like affect bridge is essentially identifying an emotion and then asking for or going to a memory tied to that emotion. Okay, so an induction for me, that usually takes anywhere between, I would have said 15 to 25 minutes. If it's a brand new client, I've never seen this person before, I don't know how much they've engaged with my work. Even if it is just, yeah, I know that they've listened to my podcast a few times. Even if it is that, I still, if it's a first-time client, the induction for a past life regression is around like 23, even 25 minutes. If it's a return client, it's going to be shorter, closer to like 15 to 20 minutes, just depending on the client and how often we've seen each other. So that's the induction piece of it. Once we use that induction and our client is in that space experiencing past life scenes, in a past life regression, and I know Sarah's is different and we'll talk about those differences, but for the purposes, I guess, of this conversation right here, I say most people see or experience 3 to 5 past life scenes. So we navigate these scenes with a series of like the open, thoughtful, curious questions, non-judgmental questions. And it's really just helping them. You're asking questions to help them get more information about the scene that they're in. So I really think of it, again, when it comes down to, Amanda, I think you asked the question something along the lines of like, if someone doesn't like the session or if they didn't get what they thought they needed or whatever. I feel like when we think of it in terms of putting them into the past life scenes or helping them to get into that space, then us asking questions about what they're experiencing in those scenes, it will naturally unfold in a way where they'll be able to eventually, if not during it, connect the dots and understand why they're seeing it. So these open, thoughtful, curious questions are really there to get them to understand what's going on in these scenes. So speaking of like that dot connecting and understanding like what we experienced in the past life scenes and how life is going forward, that happens, I think, effortlessly and automatically. It happens pretty naturally. But to know that it really is a time when we're in those past life scenes, it is a time when we are really focused on just getting information. Like I think of it as like, you're here collecting data. You're just observing what comes to mind, telling me what you're observing, feeling, sensing. And then from there, once we go through all of the scenes, go through the death scene and reflect on that life, those things will just will naturally become aware of that dot connecting, that associating between like what happened in those scenes, what does that mean for us in this life? And so again, it happens naturally, but I really always push my clients and remind hypnotists is that when we're in those past life scenes, we're not analyzing, we're getting information. And it's afterwards that we reflect, try to do some integration, and then see what that means for them moving forward. Okay, so 3 to 5 scenes. And that number varies just based on what they're experiencing. If it's a detailed scene with a lot of action, we might spend 15 minutes in that one scene talking about it, experiencing it. If it's super quick and there's a lot of alone time and just like a lot of reflecting, you might see more than one scene just because there's not a lot going on in terms of like details to grab onto in each scene. And one is not better than the other. It's not like it's a better past life regression if they see more scenes or less scenes. It just is the way it unfolded, and that's it. So most people go through a death scene. Every once in a while, someone doesn't go through a death scene. It's all very natural. And it's at that time that I like to try to capture like what is this person experiencing? What is this soul observing? What is this soul thinking as their soul leaves their body? It almost seems to me, at least with my clients and my personal experience, is like that area of like death, soul leaves body. It's kind of like what we're thinking of there can weigh so heavy on like how we show up in this life if it hasn't been healed since then. So I think that the death scene can be really powerful in not only in that conclusion of that life, but even just like overarching thoughts about life and what life is and how people are as we move out of lives. It's pretty interesting to see how we can carry some of that around. So after the death scene, I always just ask a few reflecting questions like, why did this client see this past life at this time is one of the questions that I ask in the spiritual reflection and guidance portion of it. So, well, I guess I skipped ahead there. So from that death scene, reflecting on that past life, a question I always ask is, was that a good life? And if that question is no, I go, why? What made it a not great life? How would you describe that life? What made it that way? Or if it was a good life and they say yes, then I say, what made it that way? Because it sounds so simple, but when we're in that space of hypnotic trance and really trying to understand and acknowledge the beliefs that are held in our subconscious mind, to really get an up close view of like how simple and healing and easy a good life can be really refreshing for people living in this day where it seems like, our happiness is just a few purchases away. So we kind of reflect on that. then I just help them to send love and gratitude to that past life, the work they did in that life, anybody who did that life with them. And then we just move to a space of spiritual guidance. I like to do that, even if it is just like 5 minutes at the end of the session, depending on their session, how it unfolds, what their intentions are. Even if it is just a few minutes of the session, this space of spiritual guidance is a great way to begin that integration. What we experience in that hypnotic trance, and when we come out of it, it is in us. That change has been made. It might take a few weeks to notice as it integrates, but I think we can accelerate that by asking a few really open-ended, curious questions just in the space of spiritual guidance. So as I move a client from the death scene to the space of spiritual guidance, I remind them, I'm going to ask some questions, but I'm asking these questions to your higher self and your spirit guides. And if they use a different word besides spirit guides, I would insert that word, like angels or spirit team or whatever. And then I say, so I'm going to ask the question and you're going to answer the question the same way you've been answering all these questions. You'll listen to the question, just observe what comes to mind and let me know. And that's me telling them, I'm not asking you, the client, to sit here and analyze why you saw it. I'm saying, listen to the question, let your spirit guides and higher self let you know why you saw this. And so the first question I always ask in that space, like I said, is why was this client shown this past life at this time? And I think that's such a powerful question because I'm at a point on my journey right now where it is so ordinary, regularly happens to me where I think the client saw this past life because of this reason, based on the experience and their intentions. And then their spirit guides will say, oh, they saw this past life because of insert something else the client is working on that they never brought up, that I had no idea was going on. And it's like they needed to finish that before they could actually tackle whatever is next on their journey. And so in that, I really see like how divinely guided these sessions are and how much the client's power is really here to help them learn, help them heal. And again, I just kind of feel like I'm creating that space. I'm asking the questions. I'm staying tuned into the unseen realms with that client, and they're able to really get this information from themselves. And so say the question was, say I asked, why did this client see this past life at this time? And say the response was something to the effect of like, I don't know, I'm having a hard time even thinking of it, but say there was an action item because this client needs to remember how easy it is to be connected and that they need to be more connected to their spirit guides or something, or to their intuition. And that is great. And I know firsthand experience how that shit can change your life. And I also know that everyone's journey is different. And so instead of leaving it there, which that could be healing for the client, even if you forget, even if you just leave it there, but then I would say something to the effect of like, and what can this client do to stay more connected? What works? Is there something this client does to block that? Is there something this client already does that they can keep doing and know they're on the path to get whatever it is that they said they wanted, an answer, a feeling, a whatever? So it really is a great way to kind of allow the divine guidance of the session to come through and show the client, this is why you saw that life. And then I ask questions of like, okay, if that's why they saw this, how can they get that into their daily life? And I'm using their intention statement and the intake conversation to really guide those questions. Because maybe this client is like, I've never felt connected, or I used to feel connected and now I don't. Like those are two different situations. And even though they're very similar, same kind of intention statement, maybe same kind of reasons why they maybe see a past life, the questions I ask might be a little bit different. And it's really just to be able to get the reason why they saw this past life and to continue that growth and connection and self-knowledge and growth in whatever direction the intention statement was, trying to get that in their daily life. So it's not like every client comes out with like, oh, a prescription for meditation or walking in nature, but it's really just trying to get them to be able to have something practical that they can maybe use in the future if they feel like, oh, I learned this in my past life regression, if it's relevant to the session, to their journey, to the intention statement. In the space of spiritual guidance, for me, this spiritual guidance thing the spiritual guidance portion of it could be a spirit guide session. It could be an entire session on its own, but it's a nice way to kind of tie a bow on a past life regression and really ask the client, why did you see their spirit guides? Why did you see this past life? I did not conjure this up out of my hat for you. So helping with that. But in the space of spiritual guidance too, like say maybe they had an injury or trauma in that past life that they still feel in this life, then I would say, if the client comes, say it was like, why did this client see this past life at this time? And they were like, because they need to heal this trauma. And maybe it was an emotional reaction or a harmful belief or a belief that's expired. It doesn't help them anymore. Then this would be a way for them, a time to be able to address that and like help move that energy out. So I would call that like energetic healing. It can feel like, oh, physically, oh, my chest feels heavy, or it can feel more like, oh, I'm sensing just like a block or a heaviness on my shoulders, or it could be just like a mental idea, a knowing, a visual picture of like, oh, I feel like I have handcuffs on or whatever. But if a client is like still carrying the emotion, the blocks, the residues from that past life, we can help to move that energy out. And I would call that the energetic healing portion of it. And we'll get more into that. Like we touch on that in shadow work. We touch on that in the divine guidance sessions. And even some of the scripts that I'll be highlighting today, we touch on that. And then the last kind of thing we can do, or we can do so many things in that spiritual guidance portion, but for a past life regression, like any insights, clarity, or answers that they want. So sometimes a client will come and they will have an intention statement and like just kind of a list of things that they're working on. We can just kind of feel out, like, does this feel like a lot? And if it's like, whoa, they have, questions for their spirit guides and they have this intention for their past life regression, you can ask questions of those spirit guides at the end, and how much time you want to spend there is really up to you. And that's a call you're going to have to make. I like my sessions to be 90 minutes or less, and at the very, very most be like an hour and 45 minutes. Just personally, that's where I'm at as a facilitator. So I give people, hey, we can ask those questions if we have time, but just so you know, my focus is going to be on your intention statement and getting clarity around that. But maybe someone comes in with the intention statement to like, I want to feel more in my power. And then they also have a question of like, should I quit my job or not? That would be a question we could just throw on the end. Why did this client see this past life? And then my next question is, what can they know or understand about a potential job transition? What can they know or remember about their purpose in life to help them feel more fulfilled, if that's like why they want to quit their job? So there's many different ways we can go about it, but that space of spiritual guidance at the end is something that can be super short, where you just kind of ask that question, why did they see this past life at this time? Maybe do some energetic healing if it's appropriate, or answer those more questions that a client might have that they just want to ask their spirit guides or their higher self. But that portion of the session is kind of like, it's like an accordion at the end of the session. And for me, it can last like as long as it needs to, or be as short as it needs to. And it's kind of nice, I think, when you're first starting out, managing the time along with managing the journey, it can be kind of nice to have something at the end where you can like expand out if you feel like, oh, I want to kill some time, or like if you feel like I want all my sessions to be a certain amount of time and you don't want them to be, shorter, you could always expand that and ask more questions and about their spirit guides, whatever they want. But I like that portion of it. I think it's a great way to tie a bow on it, clarify some things for the client, and then also just get more answers, kind of like the frosting on the top. And then after that, we wake the client up. We do our 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, awake, balanced, ready for the rest of your day or night. And it is, as I use a similar awakening in a directive script as I do a past life regression. So with the past life regression, as you'll see, like in the scripts and stuff that we share, it's about, bringing them back from that space of spiritual guidance into the present moment, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But that's essentially, it's really similar to the scripts that you've all have been reading and that sort of thing. And again, if you feel like, hey, my clients really go deep and it seems like I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it takes them a while to wake up, like 2 minutes or something like that, you could always count 8 to 1, 10 to 1. It really is up to you, but just to know, like counting them back and cueing that they are awake, energetic, alert, ready for what comes next in their day, I think is the most important part of that. Okay.
So Samantha's question is around getting consent for the energy healing. So with this particular technique, it is not like Reiki or energy healing in the sense that like Gina is healing the client. This is completely client-led, and you give the client the opportunity of how they're going to clear it if they want to clear it. And we'll talk a lot more about those techniques and how to lead the client through it. But just like every hypnotic technique that we're going to teach, it's completely client-led and the client is in control the whole time. So if you're someone who wants to incorporate Reiki or energy healing where the actual facilitator is at the lead of that, then I would say definitely get consent if that's the plan. And then, yeah, as far as just the anatomy of a past life regression, I just would add that in that spiritual reflection and guidance space, I and most hypnotists take notes the whole session. But during that time is when I start pulling from the client's language and the way that they're answering those questions to do even more hypnotic suggestions. So that can just be as simple as like repeating back what their spirit guides are saying to them. And just like that extra level of like hearing that validation in your voice, hearing that affirmation in your voice, I feel like can just anchor those answers even deeper. So I would just add hypnotic suggestion in that space, whether that's coming from their original intention, whether that's coming just from the healing they got throughout the scenes. But again, using their language and or their spirit guides language in that space for that. And then one other quick thing that I have found, and we will definitely go into this in tricky scenarios, but there have been times where my clients have hit a wall or hit a block earlier than in the spiritual reflection. So this space of like, I feel like I'm just hitting a wall over and over again, or it's like I feel like I can't turn around or whatever it is. And in those cases, I would pull the energetic healing technique into that moment and then go ahead and do it, clear that block, clear that wall, move that mountain, whatever it is, and then continue into the past life scene versus feeling like you have to wait to the very end. If that block is keeping them from going into the past life scene, I would say just go ahead and work with it in the moment.
I love what you said there, Sarah, and that reminder of the hypnotic suggestions during that spiritual guidance portion of it. And it can be as simple as like, say you ask a question and the client says, yeah, I used to do that. I used to go on walks and I felt fulfilled, connected, joyful, loving, whatever. Then I would say like, yes. And every day you'll be able to find more and more opportunities to go on a walk and it'll feel really, really good. That'll happen effortlessly and automatically. Like just even affirming that, like in that quick moment, that's such a good reminder. And you can do that at any time. But just to know like that is a space where you can just like, yep. And you'll be able to do that effortlessly and automatically every day. All right. Oh, one other thing I will say, that was a great question about the energetic clearing is, yeah, it's all guided by the client. And we will talk more about that upcoming again. I know it's just like a ton of information we have to get through in order to get to like the nitty-gritty details. But in the meantime, I have a podcast episode, Past Lives in the Divine, episode 78 is actually a hypnotic journey that I created for people if they felt like they had a block, whether it was like blocking a hypnotic journey or not, or just a block that they were carrying around or something that they wanted to release. That talks through one technique to do that. And it really, if you listen to that, you'll hear like the hypnotic cues for the client to do it for themselves. All right, hypnoanalysis questions. So essentially, as you're moving through these past life scenes, as you're moving through the death scene, reflecting on that past life, the space of spiritual guidance, all of that stuff, we want to really make sure that we're asking like open-ended, curious, thoughtful, non-judgmental questions. And that starts with when they're first in the scene, like asking them questions. So when someone first moves into a past life scene, if they are a first-time client of mine, I always ask, are you inside or outside? Do you feel, do you feel old or young? Are you alone or with someone else? Like if it's someone who, or if they've expressed like, I have some fears on this, I don't know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be hypnotized, that sort of thing. I'll do a longer induction. I'll ask more questions like, are you this or that? Do you know this or that? But as they start to feel more comfortable, as information starts to come in, or if it's a return client and you know how receptive and open they are, you could just literally ask, what are you aware of here? And what's happening now? What happens next? What else are you aware of here? And you'll kind of find these questions and your own versions of these questions will just become a part of like normally how you move through with a client. So, right. And it'll change for you. So know that you will grow and change. You will learn, some things will feel great, and then you'll make a shift and you'll move toward some other technique or some other way to do that thing. But one of the things that I really like to do when I'm working with a client and they're in that first past life scene is to really get them grounded into that scene. Like ask them about their surroundings. Are you inside or outside? Do you know if it's night or is it day? Do you feel old or young? And those questions aren't like life-changing, but it helps to, like Karen said, get the energy going. It helps them to get engaged with that session and just trust and go with what's coming to mind with really low risk, detailed questions. And then from there, no matter who I'm with, one of my last questions in a scene is, what else are you aware of here? So no matter if I've been asking these open-ended questions the whole time, or if there was like more pointed questions at the beginning, that's a question I always ask before I leave a scene. What else are you aware of here? And sometimes they'll be like, oh, it's just like blue skies and clouds, or they'll be like, oh, I just feel comfortable. And then I know like for sure we're done with this scene. But sometimes when I go, what else are you aware of? It'll be like, oh, this one person, there's someone hiding behind that tree or something. And then the scene will, go in that direction. So it's kind of a nice, like little cleanup question. Like, what else are you aware of here? And then no matter what, going to another scene in a past life regression, the way I cue it is on the count of 3, we're going to move to another scene in this past life. And you might be older, you might be younger, but on the count of 3, you'll be there. 1, 2, and 3. Let me know. Do you feel inside or outside? Or what are you aware of here? Just kind of feeling it out. Like if you feel like you have a client who's like getting it, they're trusting the information, ask way more of these open-ended questions. But if you get someone who kind of has a hard time with what's happening now and they're like, I don't know, a first timer, sometimes it helps to ask something more specific. So, and then going to the next scene in the event, when I'm cueing them to go to their death scene or the final scene in that past life, I always just remind them there, like, you're going to be totally safe. I think as past life regression, as journeying to other lives gets more and more popular, I think people will have less and less fear around the modality in general. But if it's a new client, I will often say, okay, on the count of 3, we're going to go to the final scene in this past life. You might be aware that it's the final moments of your life and you might not be, but either way, you're going to be safe. And on the count of 3, you'll be there. 1, 2, and 3 in the final scene of this past life, knowing you're totally safe. Whenever you're ready, just let me know, what are you aware of here? Or what, are you alone, or are you inside or outside, or so whatever you feel like would be a good question there. And then another thing that you can do, if someone comes into a scene and there's a lot of people around them in that scene, it might not be the first thing I ask. It might be the last thing I ask. I don't know. But eventually I will ask them, bring your awareness to the people in this scene who are near you. And does anyone stand out for any reason? Whether it's just their energy, something about the way they look, if you're getting a visual, maybe it's something you feel. Tell me if that's the case. And then depending on if they say, nope, no one does, or every once in a while, there will be one person who stands out. And it might just be like, oh, that's my daughter. Or it might be like, that person, that's the person who did the, whatever, depending on the story. So it's a way, it's another thing that they can do to get information about that life in that memory, is understanding the people that you're around. And even if nobody stands out to them in that scene, to know, like, do you feel like you know these people? Where are these people from? Are these townspeople? Are these people who work for you? Do you work for them? Like, there's so many different ways we can ask that question about the people around us in a scene. And sometimes they're important and sometimes they're not. And it's totally okay either way. But that can be really helpful as well. But the open-ended questions, I think, are so important, and really important in the sense of, like, when you're first starting out, if you feel like, why would they be experiencing this? Or like, oh my God, what does that mean? Then just put it through your hypnotic voice filter and go, and what else do you know about that? Or can you say more about how you're feeling here? Or what do you know about the relationship with these people? Or how are you feeling in this experience? Or in this past life experience, or in this other life, or in this market, wherever they are. But those are all ways to really help them to just broaden that awareness and really take the load off of us of, like, totally guiding the story, because that's not necessarily what we're there for. We're there to, like, create that space so they can go and explore, and we can just hold it down with our good questions and just staying open and aware of what's going on, helping them through. And if you're ever feeling confused, you can always ask them, and asking them in a way that really shines with your confidence. So as opposed to, like, oh my God, what are you doing here? Being like, tell me more. So those are good ways to do it.
Last cohort, it came up that it was really helpful for the students to, like, copy and paste these questions into a Google Doc, add a bunch of their own questions, and then print this out so that they could keep it with their past life regression script as they're learning and growing and figuring out which questions work best. So if that's something that you want to do, you can totally have a hypnoanalysis cheat sheet nearby.
Just hitting home again, asking open-ended, curious questions and non-judgmental. So I believe that everyone has the ability to experience hypnotic trance and go and get information, unless they don't want to or they don't believe they can. And so I think it's really important to leave our judgments behind. Sometimes we're going to encounter clients that, like, their lives, maybe they were a killer, maybe they were an offender, maybe they were, a predator, maybe they committed suicide. And I think it's really important for us to not attach our judgments to those things, and to check in with the client about those things. So when we're asking our open-ended, non-judgmental questions, if someone goes through something and we feel like, oh shit, that'd be a heavy thing to carry, knowing that you murdered all those people in a past life, or knowing you committed suicide or something like that, and instead to just see it as a detail in the story. And if you're concerned, ask the client, how do you feel about that? When we're thinking about those open, curious questions, it's like the non-judgmental thing is important too. I've heard stories of people expressing emotion and the hypnotist gets uncomfortable and shuts it down. People having a past life where they were someone who did something, awful in a past life. And the hypnotist has like expressed concern about that. And I think our role is not to judge. It's just to hold space for these people and know that like that's in the past, or at least it's not in this life, depending on how you see things. And that we can just take and learn from that now and release any emotions, doing those things to help release and just energetically clear. That sounds like a good plan, right? Withholding our judgments in a hypnosis session and in life in general. How about that? All right, if you want even more information about hypnosis, getting trained in how to lead these sessions, ideas on how to get clients, a little bit behind the scenes about my business, Sarah Leverett of Intuitive Empowerment's business, we set you up. We go over entity exploration, entity removal, shadow work. We cover so much in the hypnotic arts training that other trainings don't even touch, and you get it all in one training. So click the link in the show notes or go to thehypnoticartstraining.com. All right, everybody, that's our episode for today. Take anything that makes your load feel lighter and just leave the rest.